This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week, I'm going to tell you a story about an extra credit mistake that I made once in one of my classes. The other day in my Principles of College Teaching class, which is a class in which I teach people how to teach college classes, one of my students asked me, "Has there ever been an extra credit assignment that you gave that you regretted?" And I thought for a minute about that because often the extra credit assignments I give are some of my favorite ones in the class. It's a way for me to get my students to kind of expand their demonstration of learning. It's a way for me to get information about my class. It's a way for the students to share their experiences with me as they relate to my class's content. So I typically love extra credit assignments. And we made a video about this before. So I was thinking it was hard for me to come up with one. And then I remembered an incident in one of my classes a long time ago. A long time ago, and you'll see how long in a second. A long time ago, I was teaching a statistics class at the sophomore level. I went in, and in my teaching at that point, we weren't all fancy. We had overhead projectors. For those of you who don't know what those are machines that you'd put a transparency basically on top of a light bulb, and it would project that on a wall. So I went in, tried to turn on my overhead projector, and it was broken. There was another overhead projector in the room. That one was broken too. So, not really knowing how I was going to teach my class in that moment, I turned to one of the students sitting in the front row and said, "Dude, I will give you 5 extra credit points if you get me a working overhead projector." Another student sitting on the other side of the class in the front row, who was a starting outside linebacker on the football team, said, "I want in on this too." I said, "Great. First one to come back with a working overhead projector gets 5 points." They both took off. About 30 seconds later, they both come back with overhead projectors. Interestingly, neither of them works, so I send them back out. Couple minutes later, first kid comes back. He's like, "I got nothing." Second kid comes back. He says, "I have an overhead projector and it works." Took the overhead projector, I plugged it in. Sure enough, it works. So I looked over at this enormous individual, again, starting linebacker on the football team, and I said, "How do you know that this overhead projector works?" He looked back at me for a second, didn't say anything. I said, "Was someone teaching with this overhead projector when you took it?" He paused for a second, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Yes, sir." So what happened is this dude went into someone's class, saw that it was working, and took the overhead projector out from one of my teaching colleagues in the middle of their class. My first mistake in giving this extra credit assignment is I have now interrupted someone else's teaching. I've now interfered with one of my teaching colleagues. So that isn't something you should ever try to do with your extra credit opportunities, and it's one that I had not considered when I gave that assignment to these two students. But this wasn't the only problem with my decision to use this as an extra credit opportunity in that spur of the moment. Bigger issues are that this doesn't actually fit what I think good extra credit assignments should be. If you've seen the previous video on extra credit, and you should, one of the first things that I say in terms of a guideline for extra credit is that the extra credit assignment should be relevant for your students' learning and for the content in your class. And in this case, it was not. It was not related to the statistical content at all. Now, maybe an argument could be made that it was related to the teaching of the class because I needed that equipment, but it was not related to my students' learning, and it didn't allow them to extend their learning in any meaningful way. The bigger issue, though, here, and one that didn't occur to me in that moment, is that it wasn't fair to my other students. What I did is I gave an extra credit opportunity to at first 1, but then 2 students in that class, and the other students did not have the opportunity to earn those 5 points. So one of the many lessons that I took from this experience, and when I answered the student's question in my class about the extra credit assignment that I regretted, is I regretted in that moment not being fair to all of my students. And one of the things that I think is really important in our teaching is that we provide equitable opportunities to all of the students in our class, and you do not provide idiosyncratic advantages for any single student. And in that moment, I did that, and I regret that. So one of the things, though, that does make me feel a little bit better is I really sincerely hope that whoever had this overhead projector stolen out from under them is telling this story to someone else right now saying, "And then this big dude came in and took my overhead projector." In the comments below, I would love to hear about extra credit assignments that you use that you also regret, but I'd also love to hear about ones that you really liked and your students really had a good time demonstrating their learning on. Thank you for watching this episode of Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Engage the Sage.